hundreds of years we brought you the news. For any of the info, we gave you the clues. Owners' profits were always sky high. Changing market now threatens our lives. Post-literation, critical reading, dumbed down nation, signs have been breeding. TV sucking ideas from our head. Public discourse just about dead. We'll ride the dinosaur. Yeah, ride the dinosaur.
All right, you ready? I'm gonna go into podcast mode.
Okay.
Hey, everybody.
My first podcast.
Wait, no, John, you interrupted me.
I blew it. I blew it my first podcast and already.
Oh, here we go. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Navel Gazing. My name is Eugene Driscoll of valleyindy.org. You can follow us on Twitter at valleyindy or on Facebook at, facebook.com, Valley Independent Sentinel. Today, my guest is John Marini, a familiar name to anyone who either listens to this local news podcast or has read valleyindy.org for the past decade. By day, he is the corporation counsel for the city of Ansonia and an attorney in general. But by night, he is a super science fiction fan. Godzilla specifically. He will correct me if I'm wrong. And he is on this podcast to talk about Godzilla Stomps the Strand, which is happening July 27th, 7 p.m. at the Strand Theater, 165 Main Street in Seymour. It's $10 to get in, and that's what we're going to be talking about. So after that long-winded introduction, John, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Eugene. Thanks for having me.
No, my pleasure. So, growing up, were you always a Godzilla fan? Is that like your number one pop culture thing?
So I guess that's actually true since I was, I believe, 5 years old. And I saw Godzilla in 1985 during its TV debut.
Where'd you grow up, John?
Actually, I was born in Bridgeport and eventually moved to Trumbull.
Now, I remember, I'm 45. I think I got a couple of years on you. But I remember as a kid, it was either like, and I was in New York, it was like Channel 5 in New York, which was like now the Fox affiliate, or Channel 9 or WPIX. One of those always used to show, I guess, the 60s and 70s era Godzilla. Is that what you were first exposed to?
Yeah, so for me, WPIX, Channel 11.
Okay. So it was the same thing.
And that showed the majority of those movies, and I remember seeing that original debut of that 85 movie, and my parents letting me stay up to see it. And I think the following summer, WPIX ran an entire week of Godzilla movies, every day a different one. And basically, I actually still have the VHS that I recorded all of those films on.
Oh, nice. That's got to have some sweet old commercials on there. Crazy Eddie galore, I would assume.
Exactly, because you find some real oddities from that time.
Another quiet, tranquil day in Derby.
Oh no, not Chainsaw Chuck again.
This Snow Sticker's gotta go! There's still room to negotiate! These prices are too high!
I don't think it's the prices that are too high.
I'll cut him up like the steak I had for lunch!
He's out to lunch permanently.
I've calmed down now. I'll cut till we negotiate the right price.
Dworkin Chevrolet, Seymour Avenue, Derby.
Yeah, so I misunderstood. You're saying there, I forgot there was a release of Godzilla in 85. Tell me about that one. I don't know if that one jumps out at me. Was that one where Raymond Burr came back, or?
Yeah, exactly. In the American version, Raymond Burr is back. Of course, many people know him best for playing Perry Mason, both in the 50s and when they brought Perry Mason back. And so this was actually this was supposed to be Godzilla's return after the end of the original series in the 70s. So Godzilla fans know that the original series was referred to as the Showa series, named after basically the imperial reign at the time. And in the 80s, the series was basically rebooted. So before reboots became a thing, Godzilla was doing it a long time before. And this was basically created to be a direct sequel to the original Godzilla movies, skipping everything in between.
That's awesome. But before, I have a bunch of questions about Godzilla, and because I don't know as much as you do. I didn't realize basically I watched as a kid on WPIX like you did, and then it sort of dropped off my radar. And it's fascinating to sort of look online, and there's all these different eras of Godzilla movies. It almost has its own little, it's like comic books with the classic comic books, how they have all these different stories and variations and eras. But let's talk about the two movies that are going to be playing Saturday the 27th at the Strand. What's playing, John?
So we're going to show Godzilla versus King Ghidorah, and this is actually a 1991 film. So this comes from that second series of Godzilla movies. They're called the Heisei era of Godzilla films, and arguably it's the standout of that group.
Why is that?
Godzilla. Well, I guess it's just Godzilla fighting one of his chief adversaries, King Ghidorah, the three-headed flying dragon that many people may know from the most recent Godzilla movie that just hit.
They brought him back for that, okay.
And it just has a whole bunch of crazy things going on. We have time travel. We have a secret origin, basically Godzilla's backstory. We get to see Godzilla before he was mutated, when he was just a dinosaur.
Really?
We have some allusions to the Terminator series, which is really far out there even for Godzilla movies. So it's just a real spectacle. And it's all capped off by Mecha King Ghidorah, which is essentially the cyborg variation of the King Ghidorah character, and really the first and only time that character shows up.
And did that make, in that sort of revival that happened there in the late 80s and early 90s that you're referring to, did that particular movie make money? Like, I don't remember it ever coming across to the mainland U.S., but was that a big moneymaker in Japan and elsewhere? Do you know? Well,
it was actually an attempt in Japan to revive interest in the Godzilla series. So Godzilla came back in 85, that was your straight Godzilla movie where basically a recreation of the original. They bring him back out in the late 80s, early 90s to fight a giant mutated rose bush with Godzilla versus Biollante. And then they decide, we got to get some original characters in here to generate a little more interest.
Wait,
Godzilla versus King Ghidorah comes in.
You're telling me the rose bush wasn't a big hit? Godzilla fighting a rose bush?
It has developed quite a cult reputation, and the rose bush was actually created with Godzilla DNA.
Of course it was.
Of course, you can get a little into it, but so it's interesting with Godzilla versus King Ghidorah. When it comes out, it actually met with some interesting mixed reviews, as generated a little controversy with Godzilla's secret origin, because not to open up a spoiler on the movie, but it actually shows Godzilla as a dinosaur fighting U.S. Navy men in the Pacific War Theater.
Oh, no kidding. Okay. Then did you see that? I'm sorry. Go ahead, John.
Oh, I was going to say it never screened theatrically in the United States, and actually a good amount of those following movies in the 90s, those Godzilla 90s movies, never made it to the U.S.
Now, were you aware of them when they were coming out back then? I mean, you must have been in like middle school or high school, I would assume.
Exactly. So actually, no. Yeah, the answer is that a lot of Godzilla fans here in the U.S. had no idea that the Godzilla series was proceeding, because they weren't being shown on TV, they weren't in the movies, and so unless you were aware as to what was happening in Japan, you really had no idea that the adventures, so to speak, were continuing. So the first time that a lot of us heard of these movies were when they came to home video in the late 90s, which is exactly how I found Godzilla versus King Ghidorah for the first time.
Did you have like a group of friends that you were watching these movies with, or was it always sort of solitary? Were there other? And I guess with the advent of the internet, it's easy to connect with other Godzilla fans, because I know it's a true cult following. So was this like a thing you guys would watch in college together, or?
I mean, really, my friends that watched this were really my elementary school friends, right? So from there, it was sort of, just randomly running into it at Blockbuster Video.
Gotcha. All right, and then the second movie, the second one that's playing at the Strand July 27th, starting at 7 p.m. Tickets are $10 cash, by the way. What's the second thing you're showing?
So the second one has a bit of a name. It's Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, All-Out Monster Attack. And this is from 2001.
What made you? Why did you choose this one? How does it stand out?
So this is actually a pretty fantastic film. It's got, as you could tell by the titles, a whole bunch of monsters. There's even one, unfortunately, that's left out of the title, the monster Baragon, who previously only appeared in a movie called Frankenstein Conquers the World.
And is Frankenstein even
back,
in?
Decades before.
Frankenstein's
in it.
He's in it? Okay, all right. I was just reading the other day about somebody. You know what? I was reading a book I have from like the 90s where they a lot of times they would just slap Frankenstein onto whatever horror movie, and there is actually no connection to Frankenstein. But this one does.
Just the name is a draw.
So, like, and let's talk about, okay, so, like, the bigger picture here. I saw that this event is sponsored by Sci-Fi at the Strand and then the Strand itself. So what's your involvement? Are you, as a hardcore sci-fi expert, from what you've just said, the history of Godzilla here, are you bringing these sci-fi movies back to the Strand? Is this going to be a regular thing, like the way CT Cult Classics has been using the Strand now for a couple of years to show horror movies and the like?
Well, so actually, these events, these movies are being shown directly by the Strand. So I'm a member of the Knights of Columbus, and have been for the past 2.5 years.
And they own the Strand, essentially.
And they own and operate the Strand. So as we were brainstorming ideas for films for the summer, which is traditionally a very slow 2 months, I introduced the idea of doing Godzilla. Because it's never a bad idea to watch Godzilla movies. And this is Godzilla's actually 65th anniversary, 2019.
And he's back in the mainstream theaters with the whole
back
new,
in the mainstream theaters.
The whole monster universe has relaunched, I guess.
Yep, and figured these are two underseen movies that really never got their chance on the big screen. So we created Sci-Fi at the Strand as really a promotional arm to kind of get the word out. But these are this is a Strand-sponsored event, essentially being operated directly by the theater.
Okay, that's great. And do you plan, I mean, are tickets still available? Is it sold out? Do you think it's something that'll become a recurring thing at the Strand? I mean, I think it's awesome. I remember a couple of years ago, and I don't remember exactly when, like the town used to show movies there, I think on the weekends, and that was sort of died out because, I mean, so many people now essentially have movie theaters in their living rooms, so, and with, you can just get everything on demand or through streaming services. It's become really tough for these small, really cool, quaint, old school theaters like the Strand, but it seems like it's going through this rebirth, which is exciting to watch. So you think this will be something that'll be recurring?
Well, if there's another opportunity to bring more giant monster movies to the Strand, we'll definitely do that. I could say certainly we've been inspired big time by what Larry Dwyer has done with his Connecticut Cult Classics, and is doing a fantastic job. And of course, a spot for him, his next event is August 17th.
Which is
doing his horror films,
Sleepaway Camp, right? Yeah, right.
And
right.
Friday the 13th.
Now, do you think, are you appealing to the same crowd, or is this a different type of crowd that's going to come to see Godzilla?
Well, I think there's a little bit of a crossover here. Horror fans, science fiction fans, I think a lot of them draw from the same well. I think it's a little bit of a different crowd because, as you've mentioned, there really is a cult of interest surrounding Godzilla specifically in these films. And they're just not that often seen. A lot of times when they do Godzilla movie nights, they'll go back to the original, which of course is, very well justified. It's arguably the best of the 35 films that we've seen in the series. But, a lot of times the 90s series and later, they don't get their chance to be viewed as they were meant to be viewed on a big screen. So we're very excited to give fans the opportunity to see them that way.
And then I know you have your father of two young boys. What are they, like third grade now, fourth grade, something like that?
They're going into fourth grade.
And now I have a son also, and obviously the whole reason to have a son is to impart your pop culture knowledge onto him, right? I mean, that's why we have children. But I'm always jealous because I was just literally before I started this podcast. I was trying to get my son, actually it was about an hour ago, trying to get my son to watch the Blues Brothers on TV, not the R-rated or whatever. I guess it's PG. But, I was trying to get him to watch the Blues Brothers. I'm like, look, this is one of the greatest movies ever made. It gets better with age. Look at this car chase. Those cars are really going that fast. The last 20 minutes of the movie is a hilarious car chase, which isn't easy to do. That movie's not being made, and he just was like, I want to play Fortnite. He could care less. But you have somehow managed to impart your pop culture obsession onto your children. Like, what's their favorite? Are they into Godzilla as much as you are? Do they ask you questions? Are you going through the whole history of it? Or are they just like, Dad, give me a break. I got to go. I'm going outside.
Yeah, they've watched a lot of the movies. They're into it. They have their own favorite monsters. But we've got a chance to go to festivals like the Blob Fest in Pennsylvania. And I believe they were about 4 years old at the time, where they got to see a screening of the original Blob and also King Kong versus Godzilla. And I would also say what Larry Dwyer, again, has been doing with the Connecticut Cult Classics have given us a wonderful opportunity. The three of us are often there in the front row taking in those films. So when it comes to next week's show, they've been playing an active part in helping put it together. We've been picking out trailers together to show before both of the films.
Oh, that's
so
awesome.
That's some of their handiwork, and picking out some prizes that will be given away at the show, all Godzilla related, of course.
Yeah, and I saw you have a couple of sponsors, like the Vinegar Syndrome, which is a great sort of movie. I don't know how to describe them. Rare to find horror films and cult films down there in Bridgeport, and they're like,
yeah. I mean, that's amazing. Talking about bringing business into Connecticut. I mean, you have this group here that is restoring old cult horror sci-fi films and releasing them onto Blu-ray. So this isn't just something for Connecticut residents. This has turned into a national thing here where they're developing quite a niche in their area. You know, they're becoming a major player in basically releasing these obscure flicks, giving them another life on Blu-ray. And of course, they run the archive, Bridgeport.
yeah, that is
just
so
has
cool.
to be seen to believe. Have you got a chance to check that out?
No, I've never been down there. I'm just learning about all these shops. I was going to ask you about another one that I just saw that's connected to this event. I was just like randomly going on Facebook. I often fall into Facebook, the Facebook vortex, just by the nature of the Valley Indie. But there's some kind of weird shop or something like that. Weird World. What's the name of that? The other sponsor?
Wonderland, and it's in Milford. It's actually on Bridgeport Avenue in Milford. And again, another one that has to be seen. It's a collection of really all sorts of pop culture, drawing from horror, again, science fiction, fantasy, and everything from a lot of prints, a lot of just stuff you're not going to see anywhere else. You know, somebody on Facebook described it as Pee-wee's Playhouse meets House of a Thousand Corpses. And so I think, Eugene, definitely someplace that you have to check out, and run by a great guy, Eric Bruce, who does a lot of conventions. He's out there selling a lot of this stuff at the horror cons, and he actually will be there with a lot of Godzilla related merchandise at the Strand on Saturday. So he's at the Weirdo Wonderland is actually our special guest vendor, and they will be there with a whole setup. We get a little preview there of what the store's like.
That is awesome. And so, how can people buy tickets? They're available at the door. Should they buy them in advance?
So the best way to buy the tickets is the classic way, at the door.
Okay.
They'll be available starting at I believe about 6:00 on Saturday. If you're interested in buying the tickets before the show, then we'd certainly urge you to go down to Guitar Fixer Bob, and he's got a guitar repair shop right next to the Strand, and he will be pre-selling tickets leading up to the event.
That's awesome.
But otherwise, he'll be available the day of the event at the door.
Awesome. So it's coming up July 27th, and I just got to ask you my last question before I let you go. What's your favorite Godzilla movie?
I'd say it's the original. It's very hard to beat the 1954 version of Godzilla, but I think if you ask a lot of Godzilla fans that question, they're going to come up with that same answer. So after that, I think it's really the Godzilla Mothra King Ghidorah film that we're going to show at the Strand next week.
Oh, wow. No kidding. All right. So that's exciting. What about, I said it would be my last question, but whatever. I'm a liar. It's Saturday. What else do we have to do except talk about Godzilla on a computer? The Godzilla versus, I don't know if this is the title, the Smog Monster. I remember that one being very disturbing as a kid. How does that rank in terms of real hardcore Godzilla fans? I mean, basically Godzilla fights pollution. It's very late 60-ish era.
It's an environmentally topical film. It also has a lot of psychedelic elements.
Yeah.
It's a standout because it's a bit of a departure from what Toho was doing at the time with the Godzilla series. And it's also got a very sort of dark vibe to it that if you take a look at it, makes it a little more grim than a lot of the more cartoonish movies that were coming out right before. It's got its own cult following, I would say. There's a lot of people that love that one. Some people don't.
Yeah, I
Like
remember
like
it
it or
being
love it
disturbing. I definitely remember being like, this is kind of freaky and scaring me as a kid. While the others were like, they were like WWF matches. They were just a lot of fun. All right, those are all my questions, Mr. Marini. I want to thank you for indulging me, and I definitely hope it's a success. I think the Strand is such a great thing in the Naugatuck Valley, so it's so cool that there's so many different events, and people should check out the Strand. Search them on Facebook. It's on 165 Main Street up there in Seymour, and the phone number is 203-888-2102. Anything else you wanted to add, John, that I'm not asking you?
That's it. We're going to have a great time Saturday, and if you're free, definitely urge everyone to come down.
All right, John. That was John Marini, and we'll see you next time on Navel Gazing, the Valley Indie Podcast.
Hundreds of years we've brought you the news. Printed the info, we gave you the clues. Owners' profits were always sky high. Changing market now threatens our lives. Post-literation, critical reading, dumbed down nation, signs have been breeding. TV sucking ideas from our head. Public discourse just about dead. We'll ride the dinosaur. Yeah, ride the dinosaur. Our readers are in the opens each day. Online clickbait a prurient way. There's free information here to stay. Not even hookers give it away. Advertising, metastasizing, newsroom shrinking, constant attrition. We'll ride the dinosaur. We'll ride the dinosaur. Yeah, ride the dinosaur. Deadlines, bylines, pictures too. Editorial comment for $1 or $2. Fire down the block, the murder next door. And now we wonder what it's all for. Social media coming free to you, funny pages, the mayor's wages, criminal seats, corruption schemes, ink state wretches asking tough questions. We'll ride the dinosaur. Yeah, ride the dinosaur. The presses are running all through the night. We're printing the truth with all of our might. We're platform agnostics, got that interweb too. Buy an ad, see what we can do. We We still have subscribers, still have a fans. We're here every day, so give us a chance and we'll make an art stand. Just hold us in your hand, yeah, and we'll ride the dinosaur. Yeah, ride the dinosaur.